Today we're breaking down a pretty provocative argument. It takes one single sentence from a State of the Union address and uses it to launch a massive critique of the entire American judicial system. So, let's dig in and see how they build their case.
So, picture this. It's the State of the Union address. Then President Donald Trump says this exact line and asks everyone who agrees to stand up. Now, according to the source material we're looking at, this moment wasn't just, political theater. It's actually the key to unlocking a much, much bigger argument.
And this is really where the argument gets started. The source focuses less on who stood up and way more on who stayed in their seats. For the author of this analysis, that simple act of not standing is presented as like a visual symbol of a huge ideological crack running right through American politics.
All right, so let's start with that catalyst. How exactly does the source take this one political event and use it as the foundation for its entire argument?
The source really zooms in on two specific things that happened. First, the image of Democratic Party members staying seated when asked to support protecting American citizens. And second, the exact same reaction when the president honored the mother of a murder victim, Irina Zarutka. The source presents these not as just political snubs, but as really crucial pieces of data that point to a much deeper ideology.
And from those observations, the source makes a pretty significant leap. This brings us to its central, and its most controversial claim. Let's take a look at what the accusation actually is.
So here it is, the absolute core of the argument. The source actually coins its own term, a pro-crime platform. It argues that what happened at the State of the Union wasn't just some random thing. It was a symptom of a deliberate ideology where, and I'm quoting the analysis here, letting criminals roam free is a central part of their platform.
Okay, so if you're going to make a claim that explosive, you have to back it up, right? Well, to do that, the source completely shifts its focus from the Capitol building over to the courtroom. It lays out a series of very specific court cases as the main evidence for its theory.
This table is really the backbone of the evidence the source uses. Let's focus on what it highlights. It points to Tavari Pearson, who got probation for attempted murder and rape, and then, according to the source, went on to reoffend 21 times. It talks about Shaquille Taylor, released after shooting and later involved in a fatal one. And the source also really emphasizes that last case you see there, a defendant who got just probation after killing a 17-month-old child. The argument uses these specific, pretty shocking outcomes to build its case that there's a systemic problem.
This all leads to a huge question. Why does the source think these rulings are happening? It doesn't chalk it up to coincidence. Instead, it offers a two-part theory. It's all about who is getting appointed to be a judge and what is motivating their decisions once they're on the bench.
First, the source points us to the appointment data. As you can see on this chart, it draws a pretty stark contrast. It shows the percentage of non-white lawyers in the U.S., under 20%, against the percentage of President Biden's judicial appointees who are non-white, which it puts at around 70%, and it notes a similar thing for female appointees. The source presents this as evidence of a deliberate strategy to completely reshape the judiciary.
Next, the source tries to get inside the heads of these judges and figure out the motivations behind the rulings. It attributes them to three alleged drivers. The first is something it calls racial solidarity. The second is a term it made up called suicidal female empathy. And third, a fear of being called racist. And for that last point, it actually cites a finding from the Brookings Institution, which it interprets to mean that white judges start giving lighter sentences when they work alongside more diverse colleagues.
So all of this, the stuff at the State of the Union, the court cases, the judicial appointments, it all builds toward the source's final, sweeping conclusion about American politics as a whole.
In the end, the source frames the entire political world as this clash between two totally different visions of America. On one side, it paints the president's speech as aspirational and full of hope. And on the other side, it describes the Democratic response with words like heckling and yelling, and points to these state-of-the-swamp counter-events as evidence of chaos.
And this brings us to the source's ultimate bottom line. It totally rejects any idea that both parties are just, two sides of the same coin. Instead, as this quote makes crystal clear, it argues that the ideological gap between them has become vast and deep.
So, as we wrap up this look into the source's argument, we're really left with a fundamental question at the very heart of this entire debate. In a system that's supposed to be built on blind justice, what role, if any, should ideology play in how the law is actually applied?